Welcome to Forward Talks, a podcast by Goumbook on moving towards sustainability in the region and beyond. I'm Tatiana Antonelli, recording from my home this week, and I hope you're all staying home and safe as well. Our episode today, recorded by web conference, is with Saeed Al Abbar, the founder managing director of AESG, a specialist consultancy firm focused on energy, sustainable development, and urban improvement, with offices in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and London. Saeed shared how AESG approaches urban development, the impact of the situation due to the novel coronavirus on the construction industry, and his take on a more circular approach to construction. He's also been on the World Green Business Council for nearly 9 years. AESG has been working on improving building design, efficiency, and overall sustainability by studying the climate and microclimates around construction sites. Recently, they've also built some AI tools to help assess what shape and orientation a building should take for efficiency.
And then once we do that, we then work, very closely in the design process to make sure that we're specifying the right types of systems that are used. So what type of AC systems are used, what type of lighting's used, how can we best insulate the building, and then working to sort of detail the solutions throughout the process. And then ultimately during construction, we're managing that and making sure that the objectives that have been set in the design and how you set those criteria then followed through into implementation at the end, and obviously then transitioning that into the operations team.
So back in December 2019, you were also a signatory to the World Green Building Council's net zero carbon buildings commitment. And that also has launched a pathway to net zero design, which is a tool that you provide your clients to achieve net zero carbon buildings. Can you tell us more also about this specific tool?
Yeah, so basically the basis of this is that obviously the World Green Building Council has launched a call to action for net zero carbon buildings, and this relates obviously to the Paris Agreement, that we as a building sector need to be net zero carbon by 2050 to enable the goals of the Paris Agreement to be achieved. And the first step on that is making sure that any new buildings that we develop are net zero carbon by 2030. So firstly, for our own operations, it's transitioning everything to be net zero carbon during this year. So for offices and aspects as well. And then for all of the projects that we do, any design project we're involved in, is to provide our clients with a pathway of how they can achieve net zero carbon on their project, even if it's not something they specifically asked for. We feel that it's a very important element to do, because one of the barriers to people not looking at net zero buildings is the perception that it's a very high cost, it's very difficult. But we feel as kind of designers, engineers, that if we actually show them what it looks like, and what it was going to cost potentially, then that will lead more of them to understand, what it entails, and will lead to more clients taking the decision to adopt net zero principles, or at least become much more aware of them. So to do that, we've sort of developed a tool, software-based simulation tool, where we can take projects and apply this tool to it to be able to develop the net zero carbon strategy. So that would be in terms of, for this building to be net zero, what's that going to look like in terms of the glass that's used, or the walls that are used, the lighting, the air conditioning, how much solar panels are going to be required. So it's really so we can create those things. So rather than, when you go to a client and say, yeah, we should make your building net zero, that can sound quite scary. But if you say, well, actually, if you do this, this, and this, you're at net zero, and that it's in a format they can understand, and how much it's going to potentially cost. So that's what we've developed, and now starting to roll out onto projects. And we've got a few projects underway that are looking to achieve net zero carbon, which are going through design at the moment.
One of the aspects you really looking to is the urban aspect of and the way our cities develop. And I know that back in November last year, you actually released a report that was titled Urban Resilience, a look into global climate change impacts and possible design mitigation.
I believe that urban resilience is going to be one of the big challenges that cities are going to face over the coming decade and decades to come. And I think that's going to be from a number of factors. I mean, one, if you look at the sort of population growth in cities, it's been growing rapidly year on year. We're now at a point where more than half of the world live in cities. there's a lot of stresses on cities from those aspects. Alongside that, you've got challenges around climate change, and yes, there's a lot of aspects being done to mitigate climate change, but also have to recognize that some of the impacts are already to be here and here to stay. And cities have to be resilient in that sense to accommodate these shocks that they encounter, and whether that's a shock from climate change, shock from population rise, economic shocks. So really, there's a number of things that can be done, and rather than taking an approach of adapting to these shocks and disasters, you can actually design and integrate the city in such a way that it's more resilient to do that through the way that the infrastructure is developed. So that was part of the research that we did, and sort of outlining sort of mechanisms for that. And that can be ranging from things from flood protection, storm protection, even using sort of natural features. So you're not just putting hard infrastructure in place, but also using features that can enable that to make cities more resilient. So that was really the basis of the research that we were doing.
Can you give us an example of a local situation that either has been already tackled or that you would look into in terms of resilience? Let's say I'm talking about Dubai or other cities in the Seven Emirates.
Well, I mean, certainly in Dubai, I mean, the sort of climate adaptation is top of the agenda. It's being led by the Executive Council of looking at ways that Dubai has to adapt for climate adaptation. One of those areas is simply is sea level rise. So looking at coastal protection of how resilient on that. Resilience on storm events. We've seen over the last year there's been definitely more sort of stronger rain events and stronger storm events, and how the city's infrastructure can better accommodate that. So I mean that's just two simple examples that we're seeing already in Dubai, and it's sort of prudent for cities not to just plan for what's now, but also to model what to expect from the future of shocks that might come onto the city from either climate change or population growths.
The construction industry right now, what is the future here in the region? And I mean, today we're doing this interview also for the first time online because of the restrictions of the coronavirus. And what is the impact of this virus, for example, in the industry? What measures do you have in place to weather this storm?
I mean, from our side as an organisation, in essence, our obligation is protecting the welfare and health of our employees, and taking the right measures as recommended by the government to prevent the spread of the virus. The construction sector is very adaptive. This is not the first sort of shock that's hit it, and the real estate sector for that matter. And I think there's still going to be a huge demand for construction, for real estate, but I think certain trends may be accelerated by this, whether that's the trends towards online retail, the trends towards co-working, which were already happening. And I don't think this situation is necessarily going to cause U-turns in anything. I think it's just going to accelerate already moving trends. And I think for the construction sector specifically, I mean, I've been speaking for a number of years that we're basically, as a sector, it's facing a bit of a perfect storm at the moment. Aside from the virus issues, that there's a number of very big external forces that are gearing up to really disrupt the sector, and as an industry we have to be ready for that. I mean, the construction sector is well documented as a very, very unproductive sector. The productivity gains we've seen in manufacturing, in aerospace, in other sectors have not been replicated in construction. We're still doing things very much the same as we were 100 years ago. So there is a productivity crisis that's going on. There is a huge demand for construction. As I said, people are moving into cities. I read a statistic that the world is building the equivalent of Paris in built-up area every week. So if you look at that, that's a huge amount of construction taking place. And then you kind of mirror that with the big push for net zero buildings, for climate change, for sustainability, alongside the acceleration of digital technology and construction technology. It's almost creating this sort of perfect storm mix that it's going to accelerate some real big changes to our sector. Very positive changes of things becoming a lot more productive, a lot more efficient, a lot more value creation being made. as well as a lot more sustainable. So, that's something that I believe is definitely going to be happening.
It's really, really positive to hear you so confident, and I'm glad to hear that. I know also that you've contributed to the UAE State of the Green Economy report with a piece on driving sustainable growth in the built environment. Can you tell a bit more about this? Or also, what is the state of the green economy?
Yeah, so in essence, the green economy principle is basically its foundation is that sustainability and economic growth don't have to be opposites, that you can't have one without the other. It's in essence flipping that formula to say that sustainability can drive economic growth, and can drive job creation, and it's the new paradigm of how we should be looking at this. The UAE is really pushing on this as a principle. They've got obviously the World Green Economy Summit, which global summit on the green economy gets hosted in Dubai every year. They created the World Green Economy Organization, so it's something that the leadership are really pushing, which is very positive. So sort of the piece that I contributed to this is how this relates to the built environment, and how sustainable buildings, net zero buildings, can contribute to economic growth, and what that might look like in terms of job creation, and shifting and transitioning of jobs. So upskilling people in the deployment of renewables, upskilling engineers in energy efficient design or energy efficient retrofits, creating job opportunities and economic growth around energy financed retrofits. We're seeing a lot of projects now where actually the energy savings that generate can actually be the mechanism, the financial mechanism to upgrade the facade on a building. So it's looking at these things of flipping the formula for how we can tackle sustainable development.
Before we're talking about what sustainability means, and that there's also a social aspect. And I know that in your own company, you're really looking at this side of sustainability, that you promote, a healthy work environment. What are all the other sustainable practices that you drive internally?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a number of elements that obviously we have to practice what we preach, and as an organisation, we do push that. And I think employee well-being is a key element, but also from a environmental aspect, we deploy a lot of things internally, whether it's from sort of waste recycling. As I mentioned, we made a commitment for our business to be net zero carbon during this year. So that those are covered, as well as one of the key things is supporting community initiatives as well. We do a lot of work with local charities and organizations, and supporting them, both through volunteering and financially, because we feel that we have an obligation to the communities that we live in, that we work in, that we serve as well. So those are really kind of the key areas that we focus on.
One more thing, there's a buzzword that has been really used this year a lot, and it's circular economy, circularity. How do we apply this to building and to construction?
I mean, this is a really big, important topic, and I guess it's changing the paradigm from the economic cycle where we make, break. We take resource, we make something of it, and then when it's finished, we break it, and it's a fairly linear model. So under a circular model, we're keeping resources in circularity in the system. And I think in the construction sector, it's very important that we do that, because obviously there's a lot of waste generated in construction. So I think it starts from we take resources that we're using them effectively, that we're not creating waste in the first place. We're not creating a lot of waste concrete and cut-offs and things, so that efficiency of material use is first captured. And then we're designing buildings and designing infrastructure in such a way that that materials or components or systems that are built be reused, at end of life, and can have a useful process. And if not, they can be recycled. So it really needs. It's not just something that the construction site and that's it. It really needs a fundamental change for how you design. And I think we're starting to see sort of modular construction come in. Pods, being done. So, for example, in your home, you might have a bathroom and you decide you want to change it. You can unplug that bathroom, put it on eBay or Amazon, sell it, buy a different pod, plug it in. It's exactly the same sort of dimensions to be able to accommodate that. So it's actually rethinking, the systems of how we do it, and that needs not just a construction companies to approach. It needs to be sort of how we design and assemble things so that it enables this process to be done as well. I mean, because if you take sort of your car, if a wheel punctures or something damages, that component comes out and a new one comes in. We need to be looking at building an infrastructure in a similar way. And obviously it's not possible for every component or every system, but it needs this new sort of paradigm shift of how we look at things.
We've heard a lot in the past years about eco-friendly concrete or cement. Is it a reality?
Yeah, well, certainly using things like fly ash in your cement mix and things, it definitely reduces the embodied carbon elements to it. And I think with all these solutions, it's looking at it from a whole perspective, in the sense that, are we going to get absolutely net zero materials in a whole building? Probably not, but it's actually looking at where's the best we can achieve and where's the best trade-off position. If it's a case of we can make the materials to be net zero, but it's going to cost us 10 times the cost, is it better that we get things as economically viable where they need to be, and that additional investment actually gets directed into things like renewables, things like creating forests and carbon sinks. So I think these things need to be looked at holistically, and I'm a big advocate to say that there's nothing is an evil product or an evil system. It's basically like it's looking at things from a whole perspective, holistically, globally, across all materials for us to achieve what we need to, because otherwise, if we say, okay, we can't use concrete anymore, what's the social cost to that? What's the economic cost to that? It's massive. So we need to look at these things in a whole system thinking.
You can connect with us on Instagram at Goumbook, that's GOUMBOOK, and find all of our episodes for free in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or on the web at goumbook.com/podcast. Thank you so much.